be a great tradition to build on. We're excited about that, and I think it's wonderful for horticulture and all of our industry. Today we're going to talk to you a little bit about garden design and then some plants. Some of them are common plants like redbud that you're familiar with, but different forms of them, like redbuds that have white flowers or different colors of leaves. And I don't mind questions, so if you want to stop and ask me a question about what we're talking about or something else at the end, that's fine too. As Edwina said, we do have the Herb Society of Nashville Herb Sale. It is on April 16th at the fairgrounds in Nashville. It's the day after tax day. And there's a wide assortment. We also have some heirloom vegetables and some fruiting trees. And if you get a chance to visit, we've got a wonderful garden that we maintain and plant at Chico Botanical Gardens. And then there's a second one at Centennial Park, where the parking lot is. So yeah, come and see all of those if you can. And then I think it's October, your Herb Day. Maybe I think it's October 1st.
Did we move it to October?
That'll be at Cheekwood. It's a day-long celebration. You can look on our website too if you want more information.
That's a fun day.
So we'll go ahead. You should have a handout. If you don't, let me know. It has two different sides. This side that says Great Gardens has some of the steps for doing design in your yard. I am a landscape architect, so I mainly do residential garden design. I'm on the Historic City Cemetery Association for Nashville and work with Chico Botanical Gardens and Metro Beautification Environment Commission and a couple other things. Our garden shows up there. At the bottom you have a list of plants, but on the back is an expanded list of the same plants. So it has the botanical names on the back. When we get to that, you might want to just flip over to that section. All right, we'll get started. This was just to show you the scale, that you can do a lot with a small space. If you notice the size of the chair, that lawn may only be 12 or 15 feet across, but they've done quite a bit with the design and careful use of color. If you're trying to do design yourself, let's see. Okay. I don't know. I was trying to get the laser pointer. I have to reload this again. Sorry about that.
You want to just take it out?
There it goes.
Okay,
Came right
that's
back
good.
up.
Perfect.
That's strange.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just point. Sorry about that. Anyway, what I was going to show you is this is showing how you can design one particular residence. So it's the same property on the left and on the right. I was saying before, on this side you can see they just have a driveway. This would be the house drawn from aerial view or plan view. And they've got a couple trees in the backyard, maybe a vegetable garden and a swing set. And so we'll talk about how you analyze your site in a moment. But what they've done in this one, they've extended a connection, so paving and a walkway and a patio to the back. They've done some screening, so there may be a view they don't want to see on this side or a windbreak. We often do up in the Midwest. Some screening in the back. They've expanded their vegetable garden and just made the spaces more interesting. So you look at all of those things. All right. The first step you do, you want to create what's called a base map, and that just shows all the existing things on your property. It would be the outline of the house, the outline of the house and the trees, and you can measure all of that. And I like to show the doors and windows as we walk through with clients and ask them what they like. But think about, you spend most of your time inside looking out, so you want to make a strong visual connection and also a physical connection. So I always show doors and windows, any sort of pavilions or boundaries that you have and setbacks if you're under certain codes. If you're trying to design steps, you need to know how much slope there is, or if you're trying to put in a fountain or a swimming pool, because the water has to be level. And so if there's even an inch or two of fall, then you've got to make up for that somehow. So you can use a string line with a string line level, or you can get a carpenter's level and measure out and down, and that'll tell you how, like every many, you might go 5 feet, then it might fall 18 inches. And so you know how far you would have to compensate, or how tall your wall would have to be, or how many steps you would need. And then once you do that, designers will use these symbols. Those represent trees. We have different patterns for stone and brick paving, that type of thing. Ground covers. You can use stippling. You really use anything you want as long as you know what it means to you if you're doing it yourself. So you start out, like I say, with a base map. This would be the outline of the house. That's their front steps and walk. This is their driveway coming from the street. and then their existing trees. I'm not sure what those things are. And you want to look at the first step and analyze the neighborhood. Like, do you have a neighbor behind you that has trash cans and you don't want to see that? So you need a wall, or you need a fence, or you need plantings, or do you have a really good view of like a roof top or something and you want to accent that? And where does the wind come from? Where does the sun come from? You spend your time in the summer outdoors in the back, you want a shade tree or a garden pavilion or an arbor. So you take all those factors into consideration, as well as sort of the function that you want, a vegetable garden, or you want a flower garden and some color. So you talk to the person about that, or you think about it yourself. And then we do the original stage where we say, just keep it really loose as far as your thought process. Don't rule out any ideas, just think of as many ideas as you can about what might be fun in the garden, throw them out there. And it's called brainstorming. And then we'll do a bubble diagram, which just shows loose connections about, you might have outdoor living here, you might have informal play space back here, you might have storage over here. And then look at what would the alternative to that be if we put the storage on that side. Would that flow work better for some reason? So consider different possibilities and try not to rule out too many of them right at the beginning. This is another helpful tool sometimes if you're not used to visualizing things in 2D. Sorry about that. You can get a photograph and what's called onion skin paper or trash paper, which is thin that you can see through. It's very inexpensive. You take your picture, an actual picture of your house, and then draw in where you might mask some of the plantings or have a tall tree or how you might want to frame the house. And you can do that all the way around. This picture I put, this is a garden that I designed in Nashville. It's for a fellow who grows espalier trees, which are the ones that are trained flat. They might look like candelabra shapes, or this cross pattern, which is called Belgian fence. His nursery is called River Road Farms, and it's in Decatur, Tennessee, over to the east of us here. But his house is in Nashville on Hillsborough Road, and so I put this in here to show you, think about structure when you're designing the garden, because 5 months out of the year in our area, we're dormant. So the leaves are off the trees, and it's important. Even in this, it's a nice composition, very architectural. These are all living plants in here. Think about how you mask that. And often we try to do a backdrop, either with the house or with a fence or a stone wall or something. So there is interest throughout the season. And also I try to incorporate evergreen bones as much as I can. They help the flowers even to stand out. But once you do that, I normally give clients 2 to 3 option, little quick conceptual sketches, and we get together and talk about we can do it this way, we can do it that way, and then they pick and choose most of the time. We combine it to make the final plan. So you might do one, like I said, where the patio is on the right, or one where the patio is on the left, one where it's in the center, to see what the advantages are to all of those. And then somewhere in the process, you might be on Pinterest or look at garden books or magazines and come up with a certain style that you like. Almost every client that I meet thinks that what they love is the way it should be. And they don't really want to explain it to you, so you have to ask them a lot of questions. If they like formal, then they think you're just going to design something formal, or if it's informal or natural or whatever it is. If you love Italian, you might want to be inspired by something like that. Or Asian. There are lots of different Asian style gardens. Colonial, this is the Paca House in Maryland, which is one of the oldest gardens in the U.S. It was at one time became a hotel, and that was paved over, and they reconstructed it by archaeological evidence and also an oil painting that had been done. You can visit that today. Avant-garde, which could be almost anything. I worked in Northern California when I first got out of school, and we did a whole lot of contemporary, which was a big change for me being used to traditional Tennessee and artistic sort of things. Or you can even do, there's a big trend right now for edible landscapes and habitats, butterfly habitats, and make your garden as earth-friendly as you can. Or fantasy, this is called the Sleeping Mud Maid, and it's probably about 20 feet tall or long in a lost garden. The house is gone in Helligan in Cornwall, in England. All right, any questions about designing? We're going to go ahead and talk about plants here real quick. All right, fantastic plants. This is one of my gardens up in Nashville. One of the best uses of Graham Thomas rose. This rose can be trimmed as a shrub or as a vine, and the homeowner does that himself. He doesn't have a gardener. He just trains it up, and it's beautiful around Mother's Day every year.
What kind of rose is that?
It's called Graham Thomas. It's one of the David Austin roses. That's not on your list. Sorry. And I did bring some plants. We can talk about those. Some of them are on your planting list, but some are not. This is a little public service announcement. We're going to have 2 of these. If you grow roses for the last probably 20 years, but more prevalently in the last 5 to 7 years, we have a disease called rose rosette. And knockout roses became very popular, and it seems to be more prevalent on them, and we're researching it, but we don't know if it's because of the knockout rose itself or just because there are so many of them. People don't know. But it causes this deformity. It can cause doubled thorns on the plant. It sometimes can cause reddish growth, but there are roses that naturally come out with reddish growth too, so that's not always a definitive sign. Rose rosette is, they think, caused by a virus. It's contagious, and it can be spread on the wind by mites up to 2 miles. So if you have other roses around, it will infect them and your neighbor's roses. So I keep flyers in my car and stop at condominiums and apartments and try to tell people about this, because there's no cure for it, there's no spray for it. We're researching it at UT Ag Department, but there's nothing you can do. You need to remove the plant completely and bag it up or burn it or bury it at least 18 inches deep. So if you see that, get the roots out, get the fallen leaves out as quickly as you can. And it can go on any rose. There are no roses that are immune to it. All right, on to something more fun. Japanese maples, there are lots and lots of them. Some of them do well for us in this area. These are some interesting ones that, like a red twig dogwood or a yellow twig dogwood, have color in the winter time. And so the yellow one is starting to get its leaves, which you can see. It's called bihu. And then there's one called benikawa that gets a dark reddish stem. The one they sell most often at the garden center is called coral bark maple, and it doesn't do as well for us here. It tends to die back. So if you can find benikawa, that's the one to use if you want red in the wintertime. Most maples just have normal stems. And then they've come out with this really interesting, almost waterfall form of a weeping type called ryusin, and that's more new on the market, so you won't see it as much. You have to order it somewhere or ask your garden center to bring it in for you. Orange Dream is an older one that has really pretty emerging color in the spring. It's golds and yellows and oranges, but it changes to green in the summer. And then in the fall, it gets a spectacular color again of oranges and golds.
Over here.
Yep.
Are the yellow and the red twig dogwoods, are they invasive?
Yellow and red twig dogwoods do better up north, and we try to maintain them by get better color if you'll prune out about 1/3 of the stems down to the ground every 2 to 3 years. They do get some stem dieback sometimes. They're not really invasive if they're in a wet place and really happy. We have really more trouble keeping them going than prune throwing.
I have a question about this Japanese maple. Is that full sun where it is, do you know, or?
This one?
Yeah, kind of.
That looks to me like it's at Isley Nursery. It is in the Pacific Northwest. They have a more mild climate. They can get out in the sun. Like the garden photographs you see in England, they're cloudy there, and you'll see hostas out in sunny spots combined with other flowers. So here we want to have morning sun or dappled shade, like eye shade for Japanese maples. They'll take full sun, but they scorch. All right, there are lots and lots of viburnums. Again, it's another plant that's adapted to colder climates than ours. You'll see pictures of really pretty blue berries and clusters of red berries. If you want them to fruit, you need to cross-pollinate some of the species. But this is a really good one that's very fragrant. It's just about to come into bloom. I think I brought some buds. This one back here has sort of an apple blossom color. It's called mohawk. And there are several of these that have crossed with different species. There's Berkwood viburnum, and they're all pretty good, just about the same. Carlesii is another one that has fragrant flowers. In a week or two, it'll be out and blooming. I like mohawk the best of them. It's sort of maybe a 6 to 7 foot shrub. Full sun is best for it. Comes out in that color, shades to a soft pink. Very, very fragrant. It'll catch on the wind, so put it where you can smell it in your garden. But mohawk will get a good fall color, and a lot of the other ones don't. That's why I choose that over the others. But the others are good garden plants as well. This is we've mixed in shrubs, bulbs, trees. I should have mentioned that before, and annuals, just to give everybody a little bit of interest, and sun and shade plants. I'll try to remember to mention that. This is an unusual type of bulb that blooms in the fall. It looks like crocus. They're blooming right now outside. There are fall crocus that are hard to find. There's a place called Brenda Becky's Bulbs in Virginia that's a 4-generation bulb grower, and you can get it from them or other bulb houses. That particular autumn crocus blooms in the fall, and it has these red stamens, and that's what the spice saffron comes from. And I think it takes something like 1.5 pounds to get a little ounce. That's why saffron is so expensive. But these resemble crocus. They're called colchicums. They don't really have a good common name, but they're bigger. They get about this tall. They bloom in probably September for us. And they come up like other spring bulbs where they have a little plant like a daffodil would, which is going to die down around June, but their plant looks like a tiny little corn plant. And that'll grow in full sun or part shade. So it looks like a giant pink crocus. There are double forms like this one called water lily, some that shade more toward purple and some that are white. Alright, this is called Doropteris illifersora, which is the Latin or botanical name. The common name is called autumn fern, and it's called autumn fern because of these bronzy goldish colors. That happens in the spring though. So that's the new emerging color that comes up once it gets a little bit warmer. Most of the years in our climate, this is an evergreen fern. It's not one of our native ferns, but it's a good performer for us. I did bring a leaf of it. It can get maybe 18 inches to 2 feet tall, something like that. And I keep this along, my house faces due north, and so it's shady up there, and I've got it in a planter along my front porch. Because like I said, they have some evergreen bones and some interest in all the flowers and forms.
Does it take a little bit of sun? No, does it?
It'll take part sun. If you give it enough water, some ferns will tolerate sun better than others, but that one will take part sun. It wouldn't want full sun for sure. And I put this in here. This is called Dixie wood fern, and the reason I put it in as a special plant is it grows 3 to 4 feet tall. So out in California, we have the redwood forest, and they have a type of fern that gets maybe 5 to 6 feet tall. This one reminds me of that. With our hemlocks, they have redwoods, we have hemlock trees, we have that, and rhododendrons. Most of our ferns in our area will be maybe 12 to 18 inches tall. So if you want a big, bold statement, that's a nice one to have. And there are 3 or 4 species that are similar to that. This is the biggest one. There's one called Goldie's fern that's really good. A nice one for shade, part shade. All right, this is an annual for summer color, or seasonal color we call it. This is a fragrant one. It was newer on the market, but it is available now. It's called pentas or star flower because of the shape of all these little individual flowers. And it is fragrant and attracts butterflies. It's a really easy grower. Doesn't have any disease problems. It gets maybe, most of the cultivars about 12 to 18 inches tall. Full sun. Prunus mume. Prunus are a genus that has a lot of our fruiting plants in it. Prunus mume is one called flowering apricot, and it flowers in February most years. This year at Cheekwood it was in full bloom in January. Our plants are a little confused this year. We've had something blooming off schedule and all at the same time. But beautiful, this particular pink form is called Peggy Clark, and that's the most available on the market, but there are white forms and reddish forms and double forms. So Prunus mume. Abelias are a serviceable shrub. The most common one these days is called glossy abelia. It's a great big one, and they reflower all summer long. These are dwarf ones they've come out with. Rose Creek has this little soft bit of purple in it, and it stays maybe about 2 feet tall to 3 feet tall, something like that. And then they've also come out with these that have the colored foliage in them. That one's called kaleidoscope because it really does have a broad range of colors in it. There are some, I think confetti's another one that may have just gold in it. But these are really good performers. And there's another one I love called Little Richard that is more green.
How big do those get?
Most of the dwarf ones will be, that are hardy for us, are going to be in the 18 inches to 3 foot range. The glossy abelia can be 5 to 6 feet, and then there's another one that gets even bigger.
Is it full sun?
Full sun to part shade, it's pretty tolerant.
So could you put them under like a maple tree?
You could if it branched pretty high, if it gets some sun under there.
Okay.
Not dense shade. This is a little bulb that flowers toward the end of the summer. You may have heard of naked ladies or surprise lilies, and they're usually pink. They come up, the stalks just sort of jump up in August. This is another form of it called red spider lily. You usually see them in southern states, a little further south than we are, but this one's hardy for us. And it only gets about that tall and has strap-like leaves that are coming up in the winter time. So the leaves would be out right now, and this would flower toward August, somewhere in there. Easy to grow, sun or shade for that. Begonia grandis. You may be familiar with the houseplant called angel wing begonias. This has a leaf that's shaped like that. And if you flip the leaf over, the back is very decorative. It's sort of maroon colored. Really pretty. So the plant by itself is nice. This is best for part shade. Likes a somewhat moist condition, but it's fairly tolerant. And the most common form that you can find, this plant isn't commonly available anywhere, but when you order it or see it in the garden center, it's usually going to be pink, but there is a pure white form also if you'd rather have white. That's Begonia grandis or hardy begonia. Really nice plant, and it's, again, easy to grow. Almost all of these are disease tolerant and easy to grow. Angelonia, sometimes called summer snapdragon because it has the spikes of flowers, but it doesn't really look like a snapdragon to me, although it's sort of tubular. Comes in a range of colors from pinks to purples, almost red, white, and these bluish sort of tones. It flowers all summer long, so it's a great performer. It really is best for full sun that will tolerate hard shade. And they have dwarf forms that are 12 inches tall, and then some that get almost 3 feet tall. So look at your garden center for that. It has been on the market a good while now, so the prices have come down. It was very expensive at first.
So the white is, the different species than the purple?
They're just different colors that they've bred. It's like roses, you have different colors. Yeah, they're all gonna be just in your annual center and section of your garden center.
Is it hardy?
No, it's a summer annual, so it's a tropical plant. But, and it flowers all summer long. That's why we usually incorporate annuals in our garden, because the perennials will have a season. Even if it's long, it might only be a month or a month and a half. And the annuals will carry you through when you have slow times in the garden. All right, this one is a type of locust, Robinia is the locust family, and it's a purple one instead of the white one that we're used to seeing. And that was bred from our native one, which is a shrub, which gets maybe like this, called hispado, which does have the purple flowers, but isn't a tree. So they've come up with this one called Purple Robe, and there's another one called Casque Rouge, which is Red Cascade, I think. And both of them are nice, and it's a medium-sized tree, very decorative, flowers in the late spring, early summer, somewhere in there. Easy to take care of, but yeah, maybe 35 feet tall.
Are they thornless?
They're not as thorny as some of the others, you know, like a honey locust, but they do have some thorns and bristles. This one I brought with me, it's been in bloom for probably 2 to 3 weeks. It normally would be, even without the warm temperatures. It's fragrant. It's called Edgeworthia. You don't see it very often, although at the lawn and garden show at the fairgrounds, they were selling them again this year. These are starting to fade, but they come out sort of cream and then have a little bit of gold in the center like that one does. It has these big, bold, sort of almost tropical textured leaves. Perfectly hardy for us. Smells good, and it blooms when nothing else is flowering. So I've got this by my back deck where we walk in and out every day in the wintertime.
How much is it get?
That plant, usually about 5 or 6 feet tall, sometimes 7 feet if it's really happy. And it'll take full sun to part shape, so it's pretty tolerant. And it has an interesting bark. It's real smooth and papery looking. The sort of reddish to orangish one on the top is a different form of that, and that's rather hard to find, but you can order them from some of the nurseries in the Pacific Northwest. All right, gladiolas are a cut flower that you grow from a bulb, and they're tropical. They are perennial, but they don't usually live through our winters. There are some that are hardy, that are a little bit shorter in stature, although Boone can get maybe about this big across and about that tall. There's a smaller one that's brighter yellow called primrose in that same sort of family. And then Byzantinus, or corn flower, has that sort of purplish diffusia color. And they come back every year. They just make a little grassy clump. This one actually goes dormant in the summer, so leave a hole in your border so you can plant other things around it. Kind of like a daffodil. It comes up and it flowers, and then the foliage goes dormant for the year. Full sun is best on those. All right, there are lots and lots of garden phlox, and the traditional garden phlox gets about this tall and always has mildew in our area. Your leaves will get covered in white, and even if you spray them, and there are some varieties that are more resistant if you love that plant. There are other alternatives to that. Most of them are looser and sort of more cottagey in their character, and they may be shorter. And the two that I've shown here today, this one is called Gina, and it was discovered by a lady in Brentwood named Gina Pruitt. But nobody here is growing it, so we're buying it back from nurseries up north and bringing it back to our area. It has clusters of flowers about that big, but the florets themselves are little teeny tiny, maybe a quarter of an inch or so. The butterflies do love it. It's fragrant, flowers in the summertime. This one is more early summer or late spring. It's called Mini Pearl, and it's a different species of phlox called Maculata. It just comes in that white color. It'll form a cluster about maybe 2 feet wide and about 18 inches tall. It's covered in profuse bloom for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then there's another species not on your list called Phlox pilosa, which is a native plant. It has a little pink flower, and it sort of spreads around, and it's also a good grower and has an earlier flower. Right, back to some summer color or annuals. This one was newer about maybe 5 years ago, called Gumfrina, and most of those are little globe amaranths, little round flowers. This one is a tall, sort of loose plant that gets about 3 feet tall and sort of airy, and it flowers all summer long, nonstop. The heat doesn't bother it. It doesn't really need irrigation. It'll take irrigation, but it doesn't need it. It does self-sow a little bit, so if that's going to bother you, keep that in mind with this plant. But we've been using it with Metro Parks fairly often and have good results, no matter where it is. The sun is best for that one. All right, I mentioned to you redbuds, which are in bloom right now outside. There are the breeders in McMinnville, which is a big nursery growing area. Probably most of you are familiar with that. Have been coming up with foliage colors that are decorative even without the flowers in the summertime. And so on your slide there is one called the Rising Sun, which has apricot and gold, quite a pretty plant, and the color holds through the summertime. Some of the purple leaf ones will fade, they'll be purple in the spring, and then they sort of fade to green and get sort of dull. But there's one called Forest Pansy, which holds its color pretty well. That one, and there's a newer one called Merlot that is good. There's a golden one, but the Rising Sun is a lot of fun. And then there's also one that has white flowers, and we call it white bud. It's just like our regular beta red bud. And you can get, these days, cultivars that are any shade of pink, from a real delicate soft pink to a deep sort of fuchsia, and in between. And they're all easy to grow, and there are some dwarf ones. There's a nice one called Little Woody that gets maybe only 7 or 8 feet tall. So they've done all kinds of things with that plant. Hardy camellias. Camellias used to be, maybe you could go to Worm Courtyards in Memphis, and that would be about as far as we could get unless you had a greenhouse. But they have been doing breeding on them. This one called Korean Fire is very hardy, came over from Korea. And then Dr. Ackerman did a whole series, Winter Star and Winter's Charm, and they're really the best ones still for our area. We've trialed a lot of them at Cheapwood Botanical Gardens. And Monrovia, which is from the West Coast, puts out a lot of promotion and sells a lot of plants, but their plants have not performed as well in our area. So if you can find the Ackerman series plants, they're wonderful. That likes part shade, they are evergreen. Some of them are fall blooming, and some of them are spring blooming. So some are in bloom right now, and some of them would bloom in October, November, early December, depending on what you select. There's lots of varieties on the market for this. An old red one that may be on your list is called Yuletide. I don't have a picture of it, but it's about as nice as Korean Fire.
What's the name of the series? Because I have a Monrovia one that,
They have Ice Angel series. From
I have
Monrovia.
Ice Angels, and the problem with it, I don't know if these do that, is that the flowers will freeze. It's a winter bloomer.
Yeah.
But that just happens.
Yeah, in Nashville we're in a basin and our soil is alkaline. It's got limestone. These like acid. And probably out here, once you get up on the plateau, you get a little more acidic soil, more hickories and maples and oaks. But this is a plant like a rhododendron roselia that you want to fertilize with like hollytone or something that's acidic. And check the pH of your soil. And also like rhododendron roselias, it likes moisture, but it likes to be well drained around the roots. So it doesn't want to sit in a swampy area. It wants to have some peat or be raised up a little bit. And so if you'll do that and put it in part sun, that'll be your best chance to have success with these. And then select a cultivar that is more adaptable.
And I'm sorry, can you say the type they are again?
Dr. Ackerman, it's a fellow's name, A-C-K-E-R-M-A-N.
Thank you.
And if you just ask for these, or maybe online if you pull it up, there's a whole winter series. There's going to be Winter's Charm, Winter Snow, Winter Star. I didn't show them all to you, but.
Okay.
All right, this is a little spring bulb. It's in bloom right now. I had one if I didn't lose it. It's called Blue Star Flower. That one got a little bit crushed. Anyway, it's a little delicate, grassy looking thing. Makes a great show. It's not invasive. It'll spread in some little clumps, but it's pretty well mannered. It's for sun or part shade, and it just comes out normally a little bit earlier than the tulips and the daffodils, although everything's kind of trying to start to bloom together right now. But easy to grow, and there are some, this one's raw fielder, I think, with sort of sky blue flowers, but there are darker ones that are almost deep blue. All right, this one is a hardy orchid. It's called Latilla, and it grows maybe 18 inches tall. It's for part shade. The most common form is this Latilla striata, which is up here at the top, and it's usually that fuchsia color, although it does come in white. And if you look in specialty nurseries, there's a great mail order one called Plant Delights in North Carolina that you can pull up. They have different forms that have sort of these variations where they've got color on the lip, or almost sort of a bluish to lavender color one. That one I think it's about 3 feet tall. So you want to look at the hardiness zone for those, because there are ones that are not hardy in our area, but these are really good performers for us. Right. This is an annual called Amaranthus or Amaranth, and there are different ones that sort of trail or get maybe this height, and this is a food source almost like rice in Asian countries. I grow it in my vegetable garden because I like to mix flowers into my vegetable garden, so the garden is decorative throughout the season as well. This particular one is called Autumn Palette and came from Thompson & Morgan, which is a seed house in England that sells in our area. But they usually come in reds or golds or sometimes green. The fun thing about this one, it makes a great cut flower. You just strip the leaves off. You plant that from seed every year, and it grows 6 to 8 feet tall.
Wow.
So it's like a sunflower, just growing up. It's a big dramatic statement. The leaves can be purple, easy to grow, full size. Sometimes you need to stake them a little bit if you're in a windy, exposed situation, but otherwise, trouble-free.
So is that a clump grown there?
They grow like a sunflower, so it's an individual stem. So each one of those
So that's
plumes
like-
would be one stem. Sometimes they can make flower heads, though, where it comes up on the stem, you've got the main plume, and then it has side branches. Your whole flower may be about that big.
Wow.
Real dramatic plant. Yes?
When does this usually go on sale?
It's on sale from seed houses, so you would want to look in a nursery catalog now or look online and just order a packet of seed.
Okay.
Amaranth. And you'll find a lot of different variations because, like I say, there are short ones, there are tall ones, there are weeping ones. This is just an upright type.
Is it easy to grow from seed?
It's really easy,
Celosia.
like a sunflower.
Is that the same family as the celosias?
Celosia, no. It's
No,
separate.
because they're
Yeah,
similar.
they're kind of similar. Yeah, it looks like a celosia on steroids.
Yeah.
That's what it would be.
And how tall do they get?
That's 6 to 8 feet,
Okay.
that form.
Okay.
That's the one I usually grow in my garden. All right, this is called French tree, or our native one's called Grancy graybeard. This is the Asian form. Our native one has sort of an upright growth habit and little airy panicles, which is really nice. But we're going to look at Kyananthus retusus, China snow. This particular cultivar was selected by an internationally known plant breeder in Winchester named Don Shadow. If you ever get a chance to visit Shadow Nurseries, it's a lot of fun. He has the best private zoo probably in the country also of animals. But you'd have to make an appointment. Anyway, he's introduced a lot of cultivars. There's a new colander sweet gum that he discovered called Splendor Silhouette that you're seeing around in our compact spaces now. He's introduced a lot of things from Japan. This one gets about 12 to 15 feet tall. Usually it can get bigger. It flowers in the spring. The flowers are out on the outside rather than dangling on the inside like our native one. The leaf is a little bit rounder and glossier, so it's a more mannered and decorative plant than our native one, which is suited more for probably a natural garden. It's not choosy about soil. It would do best in full sun, but it can take part sun as well. All right. This is another one that was bred with our native sweet shrub, Calacanthus. It's the Sino-Calacanthus, and Sino usually just means it came from Asia. Their species looked like that, and if you're familiar with our sweet shrub, the flowers are underneath the foliage, and they're about that big normally, in sort of a rusty maroon or brownish color. They smell really good. They smell like strawberries or bananas or custard or something like that. Unfortunately, when they bred it with this one, the fragrance is gone, but they're working on breeding back in the fragrance. The fun thing about this plant is it gets 6 to 9 feet tall, and the flowers are about that big. And they're out and showy, you can see them. So it's a really decorative plant. When it's blooming, it's called Heartledge Wine, and it is available on the market finally. All right, another little bulb. This is called Autumn Daffodil. It doesn't really look like a daffodil to me, but it has that color, and it blooms in August here usually. And it's one of the plants, which I didn't mention when we were looking at colchicums, the ones that look like autumn crocuses. Its growth cycle, it becomes active early in the season, and so you have to order this at an odd time. You have to order it in the summertime and get it planted before it comes up, because it's going to go active in like late July or August, and then it's going to flower. So you've got to get planted earlier than you would like a tulip or a daffodil, which you would plant in October, November, December, because it's going to go ahead and start growing and blooming. But easy to grow, has the bright sunny color, gets about 12 inches tall, and sun or part shade. This used to be really common in southern gardens. You don't see it so much anymore just because of the marketing cycle. They focus on spring bulbs and fall bulbs, and so these get lost in the process. This is a little tiny ground cover. The scientific name is Pratia pedunculosa, sometimes listed as Laurentia. It's the same plant, they just call it two different things. The name of it, common name, is blue star creeper. It only gets about 1.5 inches tall. It will take sun or part shade. Flowers in the spring. There is a white flowering form, but you'd have to seek it out. But it's sort of that sky blue flower. It'll take a little bit of foot traffic. In California, we did a lot of xeriscaping because we didn't have much water. So we would try to find lawn substitutes, and often we'd do thymes or chamomile or other herbs that would take a little bit of walking on. This will withstand that every once in a while. You can put it between stepping stones. Just a fun, very pretty little plant, easy grow. These are witch hazels, or hamamelis. Some of them are native, some of them are Asian. The ones with the bigger, more showy flowers are usually Asian or have been bred and crossed back and forth. Arnold Promise is an old one. It's fragrant. It blooms right now. It's just now coming out. Very good performer for sun or part shade. This is a newer one. Don Cheto has that called amethyst that almost goes to a bluish or purplish tone, which is not common in this group of plants. Normally they're going to be a yellow, a gold, or sort of a reddish color, or orange. So you have Gelina, which was also marketed as Copper Beauty there. They make small day-shaped trees, maybe the size of a dogwood. Diane is also another one that does really well. One thing to watch on those is usually they're grafted on a rootstock, and you don't want to let the little sprouts come out below the graft, because that will be whatever your rootstock is, and it won't usually have showy flowers. So if that happens, just trim it off as close to the root or the stem that you can.
Is that red and yellow on the same tree?
There are two different ones planted together,
Okay.
one beside each other. Sometimes they can graft them together like that, though.
Yeah.
And apple trees, they'll do that. Another little fun bulb. I grew up in Cookeville on the plateau, and one of the old farmhouses, the lady had all those old enamel blue pots and white pots of all different sizes and shapes. I guess they'd gotten a hole in them over the years. She had probably 40 pots of this plant all around her yard, everywhere, on the walls, on the porches. It's called fairy lily or rain lily, and it's called rain lily because it tends to bloom or rebloom throughout the summer after a rain. So you get little flowers that pop up and make that nice true pink color. You can grow it as a potted plant. You don't have to. You can take it in if you want to in the winter, or you can leave it in the ground. Otherwise, it's just a little bulb, sort of like daffodil foliage, about that big, goes dormant in the wintertime. So we'll rebloom. There's a white form that's hardy. There are some other oranges and yellows that really aren't hardy for us, so those you would have to grow in a pot and take in the wintertime, or put in a cellar. Ceratostigma plumbaginoides, that's one of the worst scientific names, a big mouthful. This is called blue leadwort, but there's also a tropical plant called leadwort, and that's why it's important to, if you can, know the botanical name. You don't have to know how to pronounce it, but just know what it is, if you can. This, believe it or not, is a little perennial. It gets about 12 to 18 inches tall and sort of trails around, somewhat loose. This is one of our best fall color plants for California. They don't have all these hardwood trees like we do, and they don't get a good autumn color. This thing turns bright red in the fall. It also has a long blooming period, maybe 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime. Trouble-free plant, it will take sun or part shade, and it sort of spreads around slowly by little stolons or spreading roots. This is an annual plant again, and this one is for shade. It will take part sun. The reason I put it in here is because we have a disease on our impatiens now. If you're familiar with that, there's something called downy mildew. And if you're growing the old-fashioned impatiens, and you've noticed maybe by July or August you've got just bare stems that look like celery. If you look on the backside of the leaf, it's probably going to be covered in this white sort of fuzzy stuff. They don't have a cure for this yet either. It started in England a few years ago, and the growers are just sort of stopping growing that until they can figure it out, although they're still selling some of them. And it will bloom, like I say, until about July. So you can still plant it. I have some clients who are insisting, but it's probably going to get the disease. So we're looking for different alternative plants that will grow in the shade. And I should mention that New Guinea impatiens are another form of impatien, that different species that grows more upright and takes more sun. It doesn't get the mildew. So if you like that, it's a little bit different look, but you can use it. This one's called wishbone flower because of the shape inside the pattern of the flower, or Terenia. It comes, may have another slide. Yes. It comes in whites, pinks, purples, blues, and also sometimes this sort of bicolor. This one's called gilded grape. And they are more available on the market, particularly now that the impatiens are not doing as well. Easy to grow. All right. Dogwoods are going to be blooming soon, and they're, like we mentioned, the shrub dogwoods, the red and yellow twig ones. There are some native shrub dogwoods, and this is another form that has, if you look in the middle of our flowering dogwood, which looks like a cross, it's white, pink, or red, and it has little dots of yellow in the center, and that's the actual flower. The things that we think of as petals or modified leaves called bracts, those white things are not really part of the flower. So this dogwood doesn't have the bracts, it only has the center part. And it flowers earlier, it's already finished flowering at Cheekwood. We have two different species, hopefully they're on your list. I put Cornus officinalis. One of them is called cornelian cherry, and it's called cornelian cherry because the fruit sort of looks like a cherry, even though it's a dogwood. But it is definitely a dogwood, not a cherry. It has the middle flower like that. Flowers usually in February, early April, about a month before the flowering dogwoods do, most years. I put the cornelian, Cornus officinalis, because it has a little bit more decorative bark than the other one, which is called cornelian cherry, and that's Cornus mas, M-A-S. Both of them are good plants, but the reason I chose that, like I say, is the more decorative bark. All right, this is Mahonia, winter sun, which is crossed with a Chinese species, and you probably are familiar with leatherleaf Mahonia, which has a big coarse leaf. This one's crossed with Lamarifolia, and so the foliage is a little bit more narrow. And it blooms in the middle of winter, so it was blooming this year in January. Angles out like that. It can make a 6 to 8 foot shrub and likes to spread unless you prune it. And one thing on that in Nandina is what I call a stagger pruning. If you prune up above a node, you can prune it, some of them high and some of the stems low, and it'll resprout even on a bare stem. So you don't have to have leaves if you'll do that in February or March. And that way you can contain the size of it, or get it thicker if you have a leggy one that sort of stretch into the sun, which often happens with that one. But really pretty. It doesn't normally get the berries for us in this area, which is maybe an advantage because the other one is about to be put on the invasive species list, I think, because it spreads around sometimes. Leucojum is also called summer snowflake. It looks like a daffodil for the most part as far as the plant, but it has these little bell-shaped flowers that remind me of lily of the valley. And they're great for cut flowers. They don't last a long, long time. They're sort of a spring to early summer bloomer for sun or part shade. Epimedium is a great ground cover. Some years the foliage will be evergreen. Usually by the end of winter it will have gotten somewhat tattered and you want to cut that off before these blooms emerge. And they start to bloom around about now on into, say, the end of April. So they're early in the season. Lilify is one you don't see as much, but it's a really pretty color. It also comes in pinks, whites, oranges, and yellows. Not as common though, you do have to look for it or ask for it. And it looks very delicate, but it's actually really tough and really drought resistant once it's been established. This is a newer one I've only been using for 2 or 3 years now that More and More Garden Center over in Bellevue, which is southwest of Nashville, had brought in. It's called Mercadonia, and it's a little annual, and it spreads maybe 2.5 feet wide, gets about this tall, and it's non-stop blooming, just a little carpet of yellow or goldish flowers. Great performer. We've had no trouble out of it. Like I say, it just never gets out of bloom. Don't have to deadhead it. All right, we've been having trouble with white pines and leyland cypress with disease issues, and so we're looking for different evergreens that we can use for screening. They came up with green giant arborvitae, which is sort of a bigger version of our emerald arborvitaes with their columnar. There are 3 or 4 forms on the market. Steeplechase is one. There's one called Gelder. And they're all good plants. Steeplechase is supposed to stay a little bit fuller in the top, but it's hard to find that plant in production. Green giant is really a tree, so it can get 12 feet across, 8 feet wide, something like that, and 40 feet tall or taller. Fast growing plant. What you're going to see really started a year or 2 ago, and particularly last fall. We're having a shortage in nurseries right now because the recession put some places out of business. People didn't replant, and now we're having a boom in real estate, and so plants are getting really hard to find. This is one of the ones that has been bought up a lot, so you can still get it, but it's harder to find the sizes. But you could, in a regular year, get anywhere from about 5 feet on up to 14 to 18 feet tall, depending on what you were trying to do. But once this is established, it can grow 3 to maybe 5 feet in a single season.
How wide did you say it is?
8 to 12 feet, maybe. Most people are using them for screens, so they're kind of
it's-
growing together in a mass. So it's a tree. It's not like emerald gets only about 3 to 4 feet, maybe 15 feet tall. This one's really an evergreen tree.
And these don't get bagworms?
They can. They're not as susceptible to that as some of the older.
But cypress aren't bagworms, are they?
They can get bagworms. Yeah. I worked with Meg's a magnet school, and they had a terrible
Meg's
infestation
down in Nashville.
on their Cleveland cypresses. Yeah. Now it's not bald cypress. That's a deciduous tree.
Okay.
But yeah, the evergreen cypress are bad about bagworms, and some junipers are.
And how tall is this?
That, I would say 35, 40 feet, and it can get bigger over time. We don't have any of that big because it hasn't been out that long. It's from the western species. All right, this is a new type of juniper. I showed you the slide that had Italianate, that had the column or Italian cypresses. This one is called Taylor juniper, and it's a form of our native red cedar. So it's very hardy for us. It's been performing well. They almost didn't get this into production, and we almost lost the plant entirely to the market, but it did get saved, and it is becoming available. We did have them up to almost 10 feet tall, but they've been sold out too, so now you can probably get a 4 to 5 foot one at the most. They stay about 2 to 2.5 feet wide, and they can get maybe 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall, so sort of vertical punctuation line. Very trouble-free, tolerant to different soil conditions, just like a red cedar would be. All right, here's my other public service announcement. Boxwoods. We're going to see a lot of fun ones in a minute. We've got a new disease on boxwoods. It started in North Carolina and Virginia, out on the West Coast. We didn't have it in Tennessee until last year. It was discovered at a retail center in Chattanooga and was brought in from plants on the West Coast. That's called boxwood blight. We don't have a cure for this one, and it does eventually do this to your boxwoods. It is somewhat easy to recognize the actual disease because boxwoods have a lot of different things that can affect them, but they aren't as lethal as this. I should say it's also been in Davidson County. We've got 3 or 4 instances of it there too. It's been contained and destroyed, but it is in our area. But the telltale sign of this, it'll have a bullseye sort of effect or a round dot on it. And eventually after that happens, it starts to just kill the leaf and the twigs and the stems. You want to destroy a plant if you see that. Maybe take it to your ag center, notify them of it, let them look at it, bag it up, just so they know. But you want to get that out of your garden as fast as you can. It can be spread, they're studying this one too, it can be spread mechanically, like it can be on an animal, it can be on your hand. If you're doing pruners, you want to sterilize your pruners, not with alcohol in this case, but Lysol. So an antibacterial type of thing. The other thing they say is it travels with water. So if you've got a planting up on top of the hill that's affected, it will probably affect the ones downhill. So you just want to be aware of that. It's not something to panic over yet, but just be aware of. Like I say, there are other things that affect boxwoods. This is leaf miner damage. You can see it's got little yellow spots. Volutella usually looks like a little pinkish to whitish sort of furry growth on it and then kills the tips back. And leaf spot can be just little dots. So there are other things. It's not necessarily that you have boxwood blight just because there's an issue. All right, so I've brought boxwoods. They're a traditional plant, very useful plant, used in the colonies, used in England. There's one called English dwarf border box. Don't ever use that. It's Sapuricosa. It had disease problems here before we got boxwood blight. But there are other little bitty ones called Justin Brower or green velvet. You want a compact one if you're trying to make a border. This one's called D-Runk. That's an odd name. It's an upright, naturally columnar growing one or pyramidal shape. It can get 12 feet tall, maybe 3 or 4 feet at the base. You can train it or trim it into a column if you want to, but that's its form. It hasn't been pruned that way. It's just how it grows. Green Mountain is a more upright one that would not be as tall, maybe 4 to 5 feet. And I like it using it in big urns or pots or as sort of punctuation marks around the gate. There's a very funny one called Unraveled. So if you don't like boxwoods, you might like that one. It's sort of natural. It weeps, it crawls around. It's funky. It looks great growing over raised walls, that type of thing. My mother is a fan of that. She can't stand boxwoods. Anyway, this is green velvet. I was talking to you about border boxes. Again, stay away from the English Sapuricosa if you can. They still will sell it on the market. Another little bulb. This is native to Italy. It's called Arum italicum or Italian arum. Pictum is just the variegated type. It would have an all green leaf in the wild. Another name for it is Mormoratum. It's the same plant, sold just under different names. This one, because the Mediterranean is a wet, dry season, they go dormant in the summertime. So the leaves will be up through the winter. So you think it's an evergreen, but it really just dies down in the summer. In the spring, it will bloom like that, and in the late summer or fall, it may have those decorative berries. It can be a little bit invasive. It can come up in different places, so if you don't want it to spread, just remove the berries or dig up the small plants. This thing is called a spath. It's sort of like a calla lily or a peace lily, and it's normally under the leaves. You have to kind of open them up to see it most of the time. Or jack in the pulpit. It's another native plant that has that shape. Easy to grow though. Elysium or anise tree, it's really a large shrub from 6 to 12 feet tall. Further south it can get 15 feet, but it's not quite as hardy. The hardiest one for us is called parviflora, which is a Japanese species. That particular one is a gold one, which is rather hard to find, but Samara Farms carries it in Nashville, called Florida Sunshine. It's an evergreen that has a leaf kind of like a rhododendron almost, but sort of not as dark and not as glossy. But the fun part about this is you take the leaf and crush it, and it's got a spicy scent to it. You can brush by it, and that's why it's called anise, like the anise spice. This is a Mexican form, which is hardy for us, and it's blooming right now in one of my clients' gardens and has that double bloom. The other ones, the flowers aren't just decorative, it's really the foliage that you grow it for.
We had one, and quite by accident I came across it.
Mm-hmm.
Planted it because it was an evergreen. It has a little, like, it's not a flower, it doesn't bloom, but it's as if it's.
A little sort of greenish
like a
thing.
little berry, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is its flower, it's just not decorative.
And if you crush it, to me it sounds like licorice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
licorice
what
is the
it
same.
is.
Anise is for licorice, yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah, that's what, and it's an evergreen plant, so it's another evergreen shrub, part shade, really good. This one is called fleece flower, and most of the time this is invasive, and they grew this in the country where my grandmother grew up. She would always cut them and dry them because they dry really well. You can make arrangements, but it's super invasive, sort of like bamboo. This is a form from Plant Delights, the nursery I told you about in North Carolina, that is contained. It stays in a clump. So if you like that plant, it's 5 to 7 feet tall. Does have these blooms that start out white and then shade to that red color. But it will stay in place for you. Then our last slide that I put on here for you today is okra, but it's red okra. So I'm doing an heirloom plant garden for our farmers market in Richland Park, and we're trying to celebrate the Nashville founder Charlotte Robertson, General James Robertson's wife, because they have their farm just on the creek down adjacent to where this is, and we're trying to do children's education. So we're looking for things like this that are functional, that were to the period, and that are interesting looking. So that is edible. When it has a sort of more nutty taste, more mild than the regular okra, grows just the same, and the pods do turn green when you cook them. But you can use them decoratively. We had a floral arranger who came to the herb day, and this was one of the things I brought to him, and he just loved using that as an interesting focal point in his flower arrangements, because you can strip off the leaves, keep the red pods. They can be burgundy or bright red like that. And this is related to hibiscus, if you notice that, or Rosa Sharon. It's got the same shaped flower.
Did you say that was a good pot plant?
Good what?
Wetlands plant?
It's like okra. Okra.
Okra?
Like you grow in the vegetable garden. Yeah, okra came from Africa, and it's very drought resistant. It usually won't grow in a really wet.
Oh, okay, so it really wouldn't like a wet area.
Gumbo is what is the African word for okra. That's where gumbo came from. All right, I think that's our last slide for today. If anybody has any other questions, yes, ma'am.
You didn't include any hollies. Are they not your favorite?
Hollies are difficult in Tennessee. There are lots and lots of them. There's a holly society, and there are many, many forms. Our best ones are probably Foster holly. There's a golden one called Sunny Foster. Those are the upright ones with the thin leaves. They're hybrids. There's one called Latifolia, which has a wide leaf, and it's mostly hardy usually here. And then the ones that I mainly use for screening would be Nellie R. Stevens, or there's ones called Oakland or Oak Leaf. So those are upright, bigger ones that are tough. The Missouri hollies, which is like China Girl, China Boy, Little Rascal, we have a lot of trouble with those. Sometimes they grow well, it depends on the siting. And also the Hetz hollies, all of those Chinese type hollies, usually they end up dying back, and they do better further north for some reason.
Where would you find out the ones that are tough? All those seeds?
You'd have to ask somebody who has experience with it. We also have American holly. There's one called Greenleaf, which is our native holly tree. That does pretty well. And there's one called inkberry holly, which is a shrub, but it tends to get leggy at the base. It intolerates wet soil. So there are some hollies that do well.
You didn't talk about skips and those kind of.
Skip laurels, I do use laurels and English laurels. They do have some long-range issues with borers and some other disease sort of scale, but they're good plants. You usually have to replace them after about 10 years or so.
Is that what's causing the holes in mine now?
They're related to fruit trees, and so if you look at the base of the stem, or if you're getting some stem dieback, you can treat it with chemicals.
We're getting holes in them.
Another thing that causes little hole patterns sometimes are types of woodpeckers. They can get on those and viburnums, called sapsuckers. You've got a pattern all the way around. So that could be another possibility. But usually on laurels, if it's down toward the base, it'll be a borer. So you'll need a chemical to treat that.
Will it go away as the season progresses?
Once it gets it, it just usually eventually kills the plant slowly. It tortures it.
One thing that we've noticed is it really doesn't matter what we do. We get some sort of mildew on a lot of decorative plants, or like rhododendrons,
Okay.
and.
What else have you noticed it on? Is it all shade?
Our roses, we actually have full sun,